Hey, what's up, everybody? It's your boy 7 TCG, and we are back with. we. Sorry, I didn't mean to struggle, but we're actually back with this Pods of Me. It's been a while since I've done my podcast. I do have some explanations that I obviously will give. So the major reasoning to not doing the podcast, I don't want to say discontinuing because that just feels inaccurate. But the reason why I stopped doing the podcast is I was dissatisfied with how the podcast was kind of doing. Like, I felt like I should be hitting a certain point, at least when it came to it being recognized, like popularity, basically, right? And it never reached that. And I let that get the best of me. And instead of just putting out something I liked, I was just like, well, people aren't watching that. Time to move on to the next thing. And, like, in theory, like, adapting like that's not horrible. It's not inherently incorrect to want people to be watching your stuff. But at the end of the day, I'm just here to talk. I'm here to entertain. As long as someone watched the video and was entertained, I did a good job. And it was just something that I forgot. I let a very small amount of popularity. Popularity may not be the right word because I'm not gonna say I'm like a majorly popular figure. I just started producing content for the wrong reason. I was trying to produce content that I thought people would like, and it turns out it pretty much flopped. Now, I still want to make content that people want to watch. Like, I'm not gonna make content like just for myself because I can just do whatever in my spare time if that's how I want to get down. But at least when it comes to something like this is an outlet that I can just talk free form, say my feelings, and don't really have to worry about anything. It usually is going to end up being okay. So here we are with this Pods on Me. And today we're going to be talking about a few things. Number one, obviously, we're going to talk about Kano and Icelander going away. Icelander and CC, Kano and Blitz. The main topic of the podcast, which if you guys want to skip forward, there will be a timestamp for you video watchers. If you guys are watching on YouTube, you guys should be seeing a timestamp now of when the main topic of me talking about how the CC metagame will fix itself going forward with no Icelander, and obviously the implications of Worlds. But for you audio listeners, just gear up. I'm gonna be real, just gear up. Stay a while. Have fun. Take your shoes off. Don't take your shoes off, actually. Here we are. So, Icelander is obviously a deck that, when a lot of people think of my channel, they don't really think of Icelander. They don't really think, oh, yes, Siphon, the big Icelander player. We know how much Icelander he's played. No. But Icelander was the first deck I ever made a video on, if you guys remember way back when. And for those who were in my live stream last Monday, we looked at my first ever Icelander video, and we seen some things I got right, some things I got wrong. And overall, as silly as that video is to watch back, it is cool to see like where I've came from, just as a content creator and a player. With that video, because again, that was my very first foray into Flesh and Blood content. I was making Magic content at the time. I was being dissatisfied with it, but Icelander was a unique opportunity where she was new. She was a control deck, and she was like elemental based, which is like my wheelhouse. And I can, sorry, I'm actually low key getting choked up here because I do just love playing like ice and control based decks. I do love playing wizard, and obviously it's just like losing someone. It's just like whenever they're gone, you just wish you had more time. You wish you'd done this when you did that. And obviously it's not different for me in Icelander. I did play a lot of Icelander when it came to the local level because I was very comfortable with playing her at the local level, even when I was like really bad at the deck. But when it came to like the higher tier events, I was a lot of times just scared to play her because I was just scared of doing bad at a deck that seemingly is again in my wheelhouse, and it's just really heartbreaking. It really is just heartbreaking knowing that now, at least until we get a new one, I just don't have the opportunity anymore. And at least now going forward, maybe losing Icelander was the best thing that could have happened to me. Because when I lost Briar was like the first deck I really took serious. Like technically my first deck was Katsu, but Briar was like that deck that I'm like, okay, I'm really gonna start doing this thing. I didn't really feel anything when I lost Briar. I was like, wow, that sucks. But like I was already off Briar for like the longest time when that happened. When I lost Prism, I was more playing Prism towards the end of her powers, and it was more, yep, this hero's just really powerful, does some really cool stuff. She's kind of like a cleric, which I like clerics, but she's not really a cleric. And like, I had a lot of Guardian players in my LGS, and it was just really fun to dunk on them every single time. It was awesome. And every other hero that's a little, like, I mean, Lexi is kind of similar to Briar, where I played Ice Lexi, and when Ice Lexi went away, well, not went away, but like became the less powerful version, I just kind of didn't care anymore. But Icelander is a hero from start to finish. I enjoyed. I always had my Icelander deck, and it was just. I'm actually legit trying not to get emotional on a podcast right now, but she just spoke to me in a way, and it's an attest to LSS's play design that they were just able to make a hero like Icelander that a lot of people, including me, was just able to connect with in like a really satisfying way that I don't think a lot of games can say. Like I don't think a lot of games can say there are people willing to like quit the game because the like their favorite whatever isn't good anymore. Like I've never heard anyone saying, "Oh, Splinter Twin got banned in Modern. Yep, not playing Splinter Twin anymore." Like I don't feel like anyone said that. And if they did, they were a vocal minority, in my opinion. Just sucks, man. It just sucks. But obviously, that's in the past. I had my opportunities to play Icelander, and I did not play her enough. So obviously, here we are, kind of just suffering. Kind of the same thing with Kano and Blitz. Obviously, I didn't get to play a lot of Blitz, but Kano was obviously my most played Blitz deck. And similar situation, Kano's a deck that is a hero that spoke to me, and now I kind of just, and especially since my skirmish is at the point of recording a week and a half away, I just barely don't get to play Kano anymore. And all the reps I was putting on Kano kind of just are dead now. They just don't matter. Most other heroes have a backup plan. Now, I technically have a backup plan in CC. Obviously, I still have Kano. But in Blitz, I don't have him anymore. I don't have any wizard. The Emperor's not real. Can't hurt me. Shut up. By the way, Emperor gameplay comes soon. Wait, what? What? I don't know, guys. I am kind of in the situation that I've never been in. Because, again, Icelander is like my first hero that I was actually close to that got banned. Like, there was a lot, like, Odom couldn't care less. Lexi, towards the end, couldn't care less. Chain, literally rarely ever played the deck. I played the deck like 2 times ever. But I'm going to have to find the void to fill Icelander. What is it going to be? I don't know. We're going to have to find it. That's my little spiel about Icelander leaving. Gone. Thank you guys for being here. Obviously, I'm not known as a person that really like puts their emotions out there, especially on this kind of platform. But just sucks, dude. It just sucks. Alright, guys, so let's talk about why you guys are really here. Let's talk about the classic constructed metagame going forward. And one thing that I actually really didn't really realize. So everyone's heard like the Fab 2.0, 3.0, 17.0, like them trying to like LL a bunch of heroes, get them out. And I was like, okay, cool. They wanted only a certain amount of heroes in the game. I'm like, cool, I can get behind that. That makes sense. But I was like, I mean, there's only like 14 or something heroes like that people can play. Like, if they want the magical number of like 15 to 20, they're gonna have to like print a bunch of heroes, but also not NLO. Then I actually looked. There's actually 20 legal heroes already in Classic Constructed. There's already 20. And we just lost Icelander and Lexi recently. So at one point, there was 22 legal adult heroes in Classic Constructed. I did not know there was that many. I really thought that there was like 12 or 15. Which I think like so many heroes aren't feel like they're not in the metagame because you haven't seen one. Like let me like for example, when's the last time at like a tier 2 plus event you seen Arachne? After the hype of Destrodon went down, when's the last time you really seen Olivia? Until recently, when's the last time you seen Rhinar? Bolton, Dorinthia, all these like heroes, right? They haven't been popular. Viscerai's been pretty much a dead hero. He's been in like 500 for like what feels like a year. That's why it feels like this is like a 7 or an 8 hero metagame. And that number still feels bigger than it actually feels, if you know what I'm saying. Like, if you go to a tournament, you're like, yep, there'll probably be like these like 4 or 5 heroes. And then like, you're like, okay, well, what else am I playing? You're like, I don't know. Like, there'll probably be some random person playing this deck. I don't know why. Again, we're talking about like tier 2 plus event. We're talking about like RHM, PQ above. Especially when you go to like the Pro Tour plus level, calling level. And it's just like, really a lot of these heroes you rarely will see play. Like, no one's actually bringing Riptide and going like, yeah, you know what? I think I actually have a chance to win. Like, they might have psyops themselves and the thing like that, but like, if you really sat them down and said, all right, hand on the Bible, do you think you can make day 2 of Riptide? They would be like, no. Unless they're just that lost, then there's probably no hope in that kind of person anyway. So, yeah, with 20 plus heroes in the Classic Constructed metagame, and basically a new format, because it was a new format when Lexi LO'd, and then it's even bigger of a new format with Icelander LO, because even though, and I'll make a separate video about this, because this topic is kind of annoying me, there's no more disruption, quote unquote, in the format, so it's going to be the Wild West and like the most healthy metagame. I mean, even though none of this stuff is true, but you know, we'll just make it true in our own heads that there's no form of disruption. I mean, Azalea and Bravo would like to know your location, but you know, we'll just all pretend like, yeah, no, I can just play, I can just go fish, no one interrupts me. We're just slugging it out like two, you know, people from New York, blah, 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 blah. No. So let's dive into Worlds and kind of what happened. So I think the story of the tournament is misrepresented. There's two things that everyone took away from Worlds, and they're not actually talking about what should have been talked about. Everyone's going to talk about Fi winning Worlds, and like 3 ninjas in the top 8, kind of. They'll talk about 3 ninjas in the top 8. And they'll talk about Icelander being the most played deck. Now, going into the tournament, did anyone predict any of this? Very small circles would have predicted this, but that's very small circles. The wider people never would have predicted that. Like, when I seen Icelander was the most played deck, I was like, wait, what? And I'm a Wizard player. I play a lot of Wizard. And I was so surprised that she was the... Because historically, Wizard's never been like the highest represented deck. Especially like Kano, never. Icelander, few and far between. Usually is like, hovers between like second and like fifth or sixth. Closer to like that fourth, fifth is where she's historically been. Whenever even she's been good. She's a hard deck. And most people just don't like playing Wizard. Sure, I mean, they're just wrong, but Wizard's never really been popular, so for her to have the most representation, yeah, that's cool. But the big story I want everyone to take away from Worlds is not who won, not who the most represented deck was, is Dromai. What happened? Because even while Alexia was legal, towards the end of Lexi's powers, everyone was saying, Dromai best deck in the format. Not even close. You're either playing Dromai or playing something that beats Dromai. Lexi LLs. Dromai just tier 1, not even close to anyone. And we've seen Dromai start to win. If you actually look at the EVO season, so far Dromai's gotten 348 points. Lexi's got 350. 348 points in a season. And people want to say, well, Fi has 332. I mean, Fi won Worlds, and Worlds is 300, so let's take away the Worlds. He's gotten 32 points. 32. That's it. While Dromai, like, I think Dromai won 2 callings, and then, like, stomped a bunch of other events. But, like, again, Fi, 300 was 32 points, 1 event. Dromai, Tao's the best deck. Now, to give you guys a little bit of insight, a lot of people did start to question, do we bring back Ninja as a counter to Dromai? My group even was thinking about this. Like, we know, obviously, I think it's overblown how bad the Illusionist Ninja matchup is now. Back when Dromai first came out and Fi was at like pretty much full power, sure, I can get behind that. Awful matchup. If you sit across from a Ninja, scoop your cards up, save mental. But now, the Dromais can fight back. Like, we even seen some Dromais beating Fis. I've been beating Fis as Dromai. Now, the skill level of these Dromais, obviously, people would take into question, and I don't blame people for taking that into question. I don't. It was weird to me to win those games too, trust me, it was weird. But it's not, oh, you face against a Fi, scoop your cards up, go home, LOL. It's not like that anymore. Sure, you're probably going to have a bad time, but come on. Like, the world is different now. It is just different. And then you look at Dromai during Worlds. Let's talk about how many people brought Dromai, right? I'm looking at some of the data from Worlds. Obviously, if things were inputted wrong, I can't blame me. Sorry. Day 1 metagame, Dromai was 76 out of, I don't know how many. I think there was like 450 or something close to that. But somewhere in the 400s. Dromai was 76. Icelander obviously a little bit above at 79. Bravo a little bit below at 61. 76 players bought Dromai. You're like, okay, you know what? I thought it'd be the most represented deck. It's the second most represented deck. We'll take that. And then you go to day 2. You're like, oh, Dromai has the second most amount of people on day 2. Just a little bit below Icelander. You know, it makes sense that it would have like top 2 conversion, which I remember back in the day, historically Dromai never converted, but now Dromais are converting. And we're like, okay, cool. We're there. Now, her conversion percentage is less than 50. But still, the amount of people compared to the rest of the field, pretty good. Pretty good. She was 16% of the day 2 metagame. Awesome. And you would think, okay, well, how did those players do? Now, obviously, with the split format, it's really hard to tell if it was only CC, like, how good they would have all done. We actually do have that metric, funny enough. But there were no 7-0 drum eyes. There were 5 6-1 drum eyes, 14 5-2, and 17 4-3. Those are all people that could have made day 2, right? And let's look at how many people went 4-0 in CC. Drum eye had 76 people. Oh, sorry. Out of 76 people, 3 of them went undefeated in Classic Constructed on day 1. That is 4%. Now, let's compare it to heroes around a little bit above and a little bit below her representation. Icelander, out of 79 people, 8 people converted. Was undefeated in CC. That's 10%. Katsu, 2 out of 21. That's 10%. 4 out of 45. That's 9%. Like, Dromai is actually the lowest conversion rate out of people who actually had anyone be 4-0, which, what I mean by that is, there were 10 decks, 10 heroes that had a hero 4-0. The heroes that did not were Dash, IO, Azuri, Max, Kano, Riptide, Technoboss, and Viscera Vincent, which obviously nobody would have been surprised about that. But Dromai had the lowest percentage of the people that actually had a percent, which is telling. Because again, everyone would have said, oh, Dromai best deck. I predicted Dromai would win the tournament before the tournament started. Now, obviously, I didn't predict this exact metagame, but I still said, even after day 1, I was like, yep, Dromai's probably winning. Even though I broke down a lot, and I was like, whoa, I actually think other decks are really good in this meta because of Dromai being like the most played deck. Like, Fi was a big consideration. Reinhardt was a big consideration. I'm a person that a lot of Azaleas and a lot of Dromais thinks Azalea favored. I'm on the fence that's more even. Like, I don't really lose to Dromais often. I have. But the way those games are, I think most decks would have lost. I don't know. It's kind of weird. But Dromai just did not do good. Now, let's talk about some of the matchups for Dromai. Overall, she had a 48% win ratio. Let's actually sort that. Right? Let's sort that. And see who actually had the best win percentage. Now, a deck like Technoboss, the guy actually was unironically 3-0. So, whatever. Dromai was, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13th in win ratio. Second most played deck, a lot of top players playing it. 13th in representation. Now, let's look at how some of her matchups went, and if we correctly understood like how those matchups goes, and if those matchups can be telling. 76 into Azalea. I am surprised that the Dromais won so much. Again, I'm a person that thinks it's even, and a lot of people think, and most people other think it's Azalea favorite. Again, I think it's even, but whatever. 39% into Bravo. I think this is probably one of the big reasons she didn't do good. Is, again, this is a matchup where I think it's a skill-based even matchup. But most people say, well, both sides think they're favorite. It's like one of those 90-90 matchups. It's just how Dromai Odom was. It's literally the same exact thing. But Bravos were crushing the Dromais. They were crushing the Dromais. They had a 61% win ratio into Dromai. That's insane. For most of the population, I would say, like, even though it's like 90-90 for like both players, but I was like, people that played neither side of the deck, who would they say is edge? They'd probably say Dromai, in my opinion. 61%. Dash IO, 47%. Dash IE, 56. Makes sense. They lost all the Dorinthias. I don't know how many they faced. I don't have a way to know that number. I mean, I do, but I just have to look through a lot of data. Phi, 26% win ratio. Icelander, 56. Kano, 40. They were losing to the Kanos, I mean, as I should, to be honest. Katsu, 31. Levia, 40. Max, 50. Reinar, 40. Bolton, 75. Azuri, 67. Viscerai, 50. And they lost against all the events. So let's actually look. What were the matchups Dromai had? Let's just say 45 and below. Well, Bravo, Dorinthia, Phi, Kano, Katsu, Levia, Reinar, Vincent. Now, a lot of heroes on there were heroes that were on a lot of people's radars. Mainly Bravo and the Ninjas were on a lot of people's radar. And the fact that she was failing in those matchups is obviously one of the big reasons she didn't do good. Like, her actual numbers in CC, she won 205 games, lost 221 games. Versus a deck like Icelander, who won 233, lost 210. Even Bravo pretty much had a 50% win ratio. He was at 175 to 171. This is so insane. I literally cannot, talk about this enough. How just, insane these results are. Let's actually break them down even further. Let's look at how Dromai did day one. She was 142 and 158. 47% win ratio. She's just below Bravo, which is kind of insane. But look at a deck like Icelander, look at decks like Five that are both at 53% win ratios. And before this Worlds, not a lot of people were talking about them. Except very small groups who were like, okay, do we bring Ninja to counter the Tromais? Like, the wider population was just, including me, who's in some of these groups, is like, yep, Dromai. Let's look at some of the day one percentages. Yep, 82% to Azalea. Fantastic, good job. 36% into Bravo. Now, let's add some context. The Bravos were teching for Dromai. They were adding additional stuff for the Dromai. Yes, this is true. But they added enough stuff to make it this bad of a matchup for the Dromai. I don't know if that tracks. I just can't see that tracking. 19% into Phi. 19%. What the hell? 36% into Katsu. 27% into Reinar. The amount of people that brought Dromai hate was enough to make this deck look horrible. If you've seen the results, and we won't really go into day two, I'll just kind of spot the day two. 49% win ratio. She actually, unironically, had a decent win rate against Phi. Horrible against Katsu. But it's just insane. I actually looking at these. I've looked at these graphs before. Spoiler. I've already shared these graphs with my team. And I haven't got a chance to talk about them a lot. But I've already gotten to analyze this data. And going through it now, I'm just so floored. I'm just so floored. It is just hard for me to understand how we didn't actually see this all coming. Because Eternal formats are usually self-correcting. if a deck, let's say deck A, deck A is the most popular deck in the format, but it's like really weak to disruption. Alright, cool. Nothing gets banned from deck A. Cool. Deck B, now the best deck in the format is the deck that beats deck A, and it's full of disruption. And then obviously the meta will eventually self-correct where that deck gets countered, and it's a never-ending cycle, right? But Dromai wasn't in this metagame to counter something. She was a standalone big bad. She's what everyone's trying to attack. The worst time to play the best deck is literally at a tournament like this. And this is stuff that if a lot of us, including me, weren't blinded by the, oh, drama, if we weren't blinded by this, a lot of us would have said this exact same thing. The worst time to play a deck like Dromai, a deck that can easily be targeted, is a small metagame with the best players in the world. Like, I knew because I did matchup charts. I knew Fi mathematically was the best deck to bring to the tournament. Now, if a few things go differently in Swiss, I won't go in depth with it. Sorry. If a few things go different, does Fi win the World Championship? I don't know. But hey, you can only do what's in front of you. You happen to make the top 8? Cool. Now, this is your moment. Go make something out of it. You can't go, well, I made top 8. I shouldn't really be here. I might as well go ahead and fold it in anyway. No. The Fi player played Wolves in front of him, and he walked away with, $10,000 and, a World Championship. That's awesome. But all of us should have seen this coming, and I'm really happy the people that did what my team did. They brought Fi, Katsu, Reinar, and they smashed all the people just trying to play Dromai because it was the best deck. This tournament is exactly how it should have happened. Funny enough. Even though no one predicted this tournament is exactly how it should have happened. I would have changed top 8 a little bit. I think, Reinar probably should have snuck in there. Or at least with how the Bravos are doing, the Bravos should have snuck in there. But obviously the big issue with Bravo is it was just kind of the most mid deck at the tournament. It has exactly a 50% win ratio. It has 4 more wins than it does losses. That's it. And some of its wins, or a lot of its wins, were against these dog ass decks. They were beating, for example, Azuris, Vincent, Viserai, Kano. Dash IO is still kind of an unknown quantity. Those were the matchups that had favorable records against, besides Dromai and Fi. But the Fi one's very close. Everything else at 50% win ratio or losing. But I still think because of how their Dromai matchup was, it turns out, I think I Bravo should squeeze in there, but realistically, again, this is exactly how the tournament should have happened. And going forward, for big events, we need to keep a term like this in mind. Worlds was probably one of the best things to happen. Because if we continue to go to these big events and just be like, oh, best deck in the format, best deck in the format, best deck in the format, we're going to miss this. Not enough people played Fi and Katsu and Reinar and apparently Bravo. Not enough people did. More people should have. Again, let's go back to the hero breakdown. Fi had 45 people. Katsu had 21. Reinar had 12. We all knew what the perceived best deck in the format was. We know how to attack it. Why didn't we? No, I'm not saying we because I loaded it and go. But we can't let this happen again. Where so many people are just missing. We got to do better going forward. So let's talk about what is going forward. Where do I see the metagame going? Now, I am a triangle believer that most metas are triangles, even if you don't know that they're triangles. So, what is the current triangle in Flesh and Blood? Now that Icelander's gone, I still think in a vacuum, Dromai is probably in a vacuum still the best deck. But here's the keyword but. Now that her counters are more loosened up because of Lexi and Icelander both going away, now that target that's on Dromai's back is way easier to come by. There's way less opportunity cost now to bring her counters. So that's like one part. That's like two parts of the triangle. Now, what is that third part? The third part of that triangle is going to be the like, most interesting topic for most people because it's like, what do you think the counter is? Like me, I think like decks like Bravo and Azalea, the only disruption we really have because Azaria's on a roll deck, and Arachne literally doesn't exist. Azalea and Bravo can come out to fight the Fi and the ninjas. Now they're probably going to have to tech a little bit more. Specifically, Bravo's going to have to tech a little bit more for the ninjas, but they can fight them. And we've seen at Worlds, even without heavily teching for them, how good they did against Ninja. Now you have to ask, okay, well, how does Dromai do into those? And specifically Azalea, amazing. Against Bravo, I don't know, because the Bravos were also tech towards them. Now again, if the uptick in Ninja increases, you'll see some of those slots going towards Ninja, and then you'll see that percentage kind of get a little bit better for Dromai. And this is what I mean by self-correcting. Because people are probably going to overcorrect and play a bunch of Ninja. Because of its matchup against Dromai, people are going to be already playing less Dromai, and the people that are secretly going like, well, I'm just going to play my Tech Bravo deck, my Tech Azalea deck versus the Aggro decks, are going to be the real winners here. I think that is like the leveling process that people could take here. Now, is it risky? Absolutely. It is very, very risky to do like the level 3. Because like level 1, play Dromai. Or whatever X best deck is. Whatever the best deck is, play that. Level 2, well, what beats that deck? Level 3, what beats the deck that beats the best deck? It's a slippery slope to go down, but I think that our metagame as of right now can handle that because of how differently all the decks play. So let me put it in this perspective. If the best deck in the room is an aggro deck, and the deck that beats that deck is a heavy disruption deck, and the way to beat the heavy disruption deck is to play a combo deck, that's pretty good. Those are multiple layers. Every single deck has a fighting chance against the other one if you know what that person's going to be on. That's cool. Where that gets messy is if the best deck is a control deck, the deck that beats that is a combo deck, and then the deck that beats that is like a creature combo deck, if like we're using like Magic terms. Too many of the layers are the same, so then actually correcting anything is harder. Again, let's reuse this example one more time. Dromai, level 1, play the Dromai. Level 2, play Faikatsu, Reinar, to counter the Dromai. Level 3, I'm going to beat the Katsu Fai Reinars, so I'm going to play Azalea Bravo. That's where this leveling process can come in. But like I said, it's hard, because what if... So there's two ways this now goes. You call it correctly, the meta overcorrects. A bunch of people going like, oh my gosh, I know a way to beat Dromai now. I'm going to play Faikatsu Reinar. And now there's like triple the amount of Ninja that was in the format before. And like half of the Illusionist. Well, now that format that everyone was teching for doesn't exist. But the people going like, oh, people are probably going to try to like bounce on this like Dromai hate. Let me get behind that, or in front of that rather, and beat the decks that are trying to beat Dromai. Now, obviously, in a perfect world, you would want that Dromai deck to be able to beat the Bravo Azalea, which statistically, okay, let me say this, historically has been accurate. Worlds seems to be an anomaly, but historically, that is pretty fine. Dromai loses to Ninja, Ninja loses to the Disruption loses to Dromai. Will that be the case? I don't know. I'm gonna be real. Fab players are weird sometimes. I mean, heck, there's literally people unironically playing Techno Boston and Vincent and Viscerai. I mean, and Riptide. Kano's fine because Kano's life. But it's really hard to predict how people are going to play going forward. Again, especially with how wrong we were here. But if you was to sit me down and say, all right, Isaac, give me your 3 decks for this weekend, because we do have the Realm Rumble. What are your 3 best decks that you should be playing? Not what the 3 best decks are. What are the 3 of the best decks you should be playing this weekend are? Well, in no particular order. I do think in a vacuum, Phi is just good. I think Azalea should be a really good pick. And I think actually Dash. Obviously I'm a little bit biased with Dash, but I think those 3 heroes, which coincidentally enough are all next to each other on this draft, when it came to day 1 representation, I think at least this weekend, I think those are probably the 3 most solid picks. All of them have a very uneasy and linear game plan that they can have, but also they can have pivot options. Specifically, Dash has like the most pivot possible. Azalea can go from being like, I'm going to like say I'm going to be female Bravo. She can be like, well, I'm just going to send a very big attack and get your whole hand versus you can block with 1 card and your life sucks. She can play on both those axes. 5 is more like, do you want to have the consistent Emberblade plan or do you want to have the mix-ups of Kadachis? Now, do I expect a lot of Dromai there? I still expect a lot of Dromai. I expect a lot of Bravo there. But what is, and this is going to be a classic anecdote, what is the most common thing to happen after a metagame shift? Especially when Disruption is something that leaves the format. All the aggro players are going to dust off their mono red decks, and they're going to try to send it every turn. Like legit, I expect Phi to be the most played deck at the Realm Rumble 20k. I expect that. Should it be? Maybe. But I think it'll be the most played deck. And I think Dromai and Bravo will be 2 and 3. And I don't know what order. But let's actually talk a little more about Iyslander now, because I've focused more on like the future, but I do want to like bounce back to Iyslander and what her specifically leaving means. It means people shouldn't, and I mean the word shouldn't. They're not going to because they're fucking casuals, but people should actually have some slots freed up in their decks now. Decks that had to bring an extra 3 to like 9 blues in their deck so they could fight against Frostbites. Exactly 1 usually. People like to pretend they physically can't play their cards. Even though they can, it just costs 1 more. But hey, cook, I guess. Well, that frees up a lot of power for a lot of decks, a little more utility. They don't have to bring AB3. They're still going to because they don't want to lose to the 1 Kano out of 400 people. But, hey, let them cook. I mean, mind you, look at Worlds. There were 3 Kanos. 3. And only 1 made day 2. But hey, guys, I gotta make sure you pack that AB3 for, Kano, dude. Don't want to. I gotta pack my Oyster Spite so Kano can't wildfire me, guys. The 4 Kanos. Sorry, the 3 Kanos out of 400 people. God, I hate the player base so much. And then, no, this is not a PsyOps, even though it's probably a PsyOps. But, in theory, people should actually get to run more of the equipment that they run. And if they don't want to change their equipment, they can just run their basic equipment and then just add again more sideboard slots. Like, there should be a lot more freed up, even though I think people were overtaken for Iyslander. Okay, you can say for this Worlds, for people that are in the know and they text for Icelander, sure, they were just on a different playing field. But for most tournaments below this, there was no reason to ever really tech for Icelander and Kano. And now you're going to see the reality of how people should have been deck building this whole entire time. Like, more lean, more aggressive, trying to just really hit those numbers. They don't have to be as conservative with deck building because, oh, an Icelander might show up and my deck folds to Icelander. And I'm excited. I am excited. Even though Icelander's leaving, I'm excited to see at least how the metagame adapts because this is the first metagame in a while that we've had no, like, ice. Like, all the Tails ice heroes are gone. There's no more ice in the format. Now, why I think that's cringe, and there should definitely be ice in the format. Objectively, I think it's probably a better gameplay experience for the average player, even though I think the average player is just wrong. And maybe even a better viewing experience. I mean, that might be a little subjective, if it's a better viewing experience. Because, I mean, people like just to see Chirago decks just duking it out like two guys from New York. People do enjoy that. Why? I couldn't tell you. Now, any of these decks that are very, very low tier, will we see a spike? So let's talk about Vincent first. Will there be more Vincent? No. Stop playing Vincent. Vincent's bad. Runeblades are bad in general. Viserai is like almost like an exception, but I think Viserai still just has a lot of fundamental issues that have not been addressed with either new cards or different ways of deck building. Technovalsen is horrible. Don't play Technovalsen. Riptide. Now I don't know how the Riptide Icelander matchup was. I mean, I would imagine Icelander just kind of crushes that. I mean, I've never lost to Riptide's Icelander, but like I don't think a lot of people have lost to Riptide as any deck. But like I wouldn't imagine. I can see an uptick in Riptide because of the ninja, but like Riptide's still bad. Kano is the most interesting one. Kano is the most interesting hero in this format. Why? He's the only wizard. That might be a brief explanation, but that's big. What does that actually mean? The only reason people would now bring AB3 is to fight Kano. And Kano, historically, low representation. Even when his good matchups have been like tier 1, still low representation. Do people still pack AB3? Because in theory, now here's like where like the mind games start to happen. In theory, people should be dropping their AB, which means Kano should get better. It's like the paradox with wizards. The more you disrespect wizards, the better they get. But the moment you start respecting them, they get horrible. It's like, well, which playing field do I want to be on? I would always say you want to disrespect wizards because they're such a low percent of the metagame. And I think that stays true here. I think there might be a slight, and I mean very slight uptick in Kano. So let's say there's 4 Kanos for every 400 players. I think that might go up to like 7, maybe 8 Kanos for every 400 players. And it's just like, how much better do they do? I don't know. Like, Kano's just such a weird deck to really evaluate. It's one of the reasons that I stopped playing them at least at tournaments. It's just so weird to predict how Kano's ever going to perform. But I do think if you're a Kano enthusiast, this weekend could be your time. Because the only people bring AB3 into you are people that are cowards. And Kano will crush cowards. Dorinthia is pretty good into Ninja. I enjoy the Dorinthia side, specifically Dawnblade side. I just think you just race the ninjas and say, hey, this Dawnblade eventually is going to have like 4 counters on there. I'll be able to block, but still swing like 17 at you. Figure it out. And the ninjas are going to be like, I can. I'm like, yeah, exactly. Max, oh my gosh. I've been such a roller coaster with this hero recently. I've been a big hater of Max, but recently I've kind of seen the light of what Max is trying to do. How does that plan go into an aggro metagame? Personally, I think poorly. But who's to say the Max deck can't adapt? Because the Max that adapt to the Dromai, Icelander, or Bravo meta, why can't it adapt to the Ninja meta? Now, does it see success? I don't know. But I definitely think it can adapt. Azuri, I'm going to go off on a limb here. I think Azuri's absolutely dog. I've never thought the hero has been good, ever. I remember people saying they were going to quit the game over Azuri being printed because of how much disruption it had and you really couldn't fight it correctly. Funny thing is, most of Azuri's cards are actually bad. The only reason why Azuri is good is because it can skill check the opponent if the opponent's bad. I don't think against good players, I don't think Azuri is good. Now, like, we can look at this. Let's look at the Day 2 metagame of Worlds. 50% win ratio. 100% into Azalea. 50% of Dromai, 100% of Reiner. So obviously not a lot of data. Alright, but let's bounce it back to the Day 1 metagame. She was 50% again. And she had most of her wins against really horrible heroes. But any like real hero that did good during the tournament literally just shadowed the Azuri. 0% in the Bravo, 25% in Dromai, 25% in Icelander. What are we talking about? Azuri's bad. I don't know what to tell you. Just she's bad. Stop it. She's bad. After that, like Levia, it's just like Levia's still Levia. Bolton in theory gets much better because Icelander was one of the most atrocious matchups, and Ninja's historically one of his best matchups. But again, just like things like Viserai, his issues technically haven't been addressed in the way that would make him blindly playable. Like the only time you'd bring Bolton is if like either one besides flavor obviously is a hyper, and I mean hyper specific. Sorry, a hyper specific metagame that we technically could be reaching. If the meta is like 5 Bravo, I think you are excited to play Bolton. But because Dromai's still in the mix, and you're not that good into Dromai, Katsu specifically can be weird. Azalea is like really horrid. Dash is just like I kind of like it gets much worse for Bolton the moment you just keep naming off heroes. Like if you just stopped at fine, bro, you'd be like, dude, excellent, and then you just keep naming heroes and like your smile starts to fade away. It's just like, okay, you know, maybe I don't bring Bolton. You go to Reinar. Reinar was riskily just brought out to be a counter to Dromai. Now, obviously, with heavy hitters comes out. I haven't really talked about heavy hitters. With heavy hitters coming out, we kind of don't know about Brute and Guardian and Warrior. Like it is unironically hard to tell because we just don't know the cards. But hand over heart, if you're asking me like right here, right now, like Reinhardt's probably just gonna become dog because he's gonna be really weak into the aggro decks. And if there's just less Drumline, he just has less matchups to pick on. He was also like pretty good in Icelander. Dash.io, I mean, good in the Bravo. I think it's good into OG Dash. Obviously, it depends on how the OG Dash is configured. I don't think it has a good matchup against Azalea, but I'm down to be wrong about that. And then the Phi Katsu matchup is just, those are just like knife fights. They're just, well, if we were just slugging it out, somebody's going to accidentally win because they swung for 40 and the other person swung for 35. And that's kind of where I see the metagame. I don't. I can't tell you exactly because there's more teams than there ever has been, and I feel like teams are the things that influence a lot of this stuff the most. And there's a lot of people coming to this Royal Rumble. Everything that I'm predicting now could be out the window. We literally just seen that with Icelander. Nobody was talking about Icelander before the tournament, and now here we are. gonna be the Wild West, man, and I'm excited for it. I will obviously be on Channel this weekend because of everyone, and I'm here to ruin something today. So, if you guys kind of enjoyed this breakdown of Worlds and the metagame going forward, make sure you guys like, favorite, subscribe. Comment down below what topics you guys want me to see next. If you're also just a Wizard player, Morning, they'll also have all the really cool heroes in Flesh and Blood, and then there's only like really stupid heroes left. Also, like the video. It's been your West Side from Siphon TCG. I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.